Business then. Stephen's with us here on set. We're going to start with Apple, aren't we? Company's latest results showing there's an appetite for its products still.
That's right. Almost 10 years after the first launch of the iPhone, Apple says they've now sold 1.2 billion of the smartphones. The company reported a 2% increase in sales in the most recent quarter to 41 million units. Now, that has calmed fears of a slowdown in demand for the iPhone, which some had feared may delay the launch of the next model, which is expected this autumn. The iPhone is still Apple's biggest earner. The last 3 months saw a revival too, though, in iPad sales. Earnings from the tablets rose by 2% year on year to just under $5 billion. Apple was keen to emphasize, though, that it does also have other ways of making money. Revenue from its services like iCloud and Apple Music rose by more than 22%. The one black spot in the results were sales in China. iPhone sales dipped there, with Apple's financial chief blaming that on currency fluctuations.
Yeah, meanwhile, the boss of Apple has responded to criticism, hasn't he, Stephen, of a decision to pull certain apps in China.
Now, the tech giant removed apps that create virtual private networks, or VPNs, used by many people in China to skirt controls on internet access. Now, it did so after a demand from the Chinese government, which led to accusations that it was aiding censorship. Now, Apple CEO Tim Cook said the company disagreed with Beijing's position, but that it had to comply with the country's laws. He said the tech giant had expressed its opposition through the appropriate channels.
So the results, how do they go down on the markets then?
Well, Apple shares rose by 6% in after-hours trading on Wall Street, and it's having a knock-on effect on trading in Asia today as well. Of course, a lot of Apple's suppliers are based in Asia. Their shares, as you might imagine, doing quite well, particularly because the outlook for Apple is also better than expected for the rest of the year. So that would help those suppliers. You can see gains there on the Hang Seng in Hong Kong, on the Kospi in Seoul, and on the Nikkei in Tokyo, all places where China has, or rather Apple has, suppliers. Now, we're keeping an eye on the oil markets for you today as well. That's prices slipping after renewed fears of oversupply in the market. The international benchmark Brent crude, as you can see there, trading at $51.40 a barrel, down, of course, on the last 24 hours.
Now, German car executives are going to meet with ministers today. This is to discuss the future of their industry.
This as the government in Germany comes under increasing pressure to tackle pollution in cities. Now, Paris and London have announced plans to phase out polluting vehicles entirely, but Germany is home to some of Europe's biggest car makers, which employ around 800,000 people. The emissions scandal at Volkswagen has also put the industry under pressure. Environmental groups want urgent action.
We must now act decisively and really implement measures that make vehicles clean. And that means hardware upgrades as a first step. 9 million diesel vehicles must have their faulty exhaust systems removed, and they must be replaced with catalytic exhaust converters that use urea and work properly. Only this measure will improve air quality in German cities, to the point that limits are no longer exceeded, and we no longer have 10,000 deaths per year.
Now, France and Italy have promised to work together to resolve a dispute over the sale of a shipyard on France's Atlantic coast. French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire met his Italian counterpart in Rome on Tuesday to discuss the standoff. This after a deal to sell the STX shipyards to Italy's Fincantieri fell apart, and Paris chose to nationalise the company instead. Rome wants a majority stake in the site. The French government, though, wants to maintain a 50% share. They've agreed to continue talks until September 27th.
Now, Stephen's got another story of a company takeover in France. This one went a little bit more smoothly, though.
Now, when an ice cream maker in southwest France decided to move its production abroad, its workers stepped in to save their jobs. They took over the factory and created their own brand. After taking pay cuts to get the business started, they're now beginning to reap the rewards. Lauren Berstecker has the story.
When this ice cream company decided to outsource its production, these employees took a bold and unusual step. Instead of looking for work elsewhere, they chose to buy the factory back themselves.
It was probably a risk, but it was work. At least we had a job. Finding work here is nearly impossible. We created our own jobs, and that's fantastic.
The 19 employees invested €5,000 each and took a significant pay cut to buy back the plant. Today, only one machine remains operational, and the company has gone from producing industrial quantities of ice cream to making a more artisanal product.
We now use fresh pasteurized milk as opposed to powdered milk mixed with water.
A gamble that started to pay off. The company's revenue grew by 20% in 2016. But profits are only part of the story. For many of these novice entrepreneurs, their biggest accomplishment is to have protected their livelihood.
It's really a source of pride. We fought back, we didn't roll over, and we managed to reach our goal.
The concept of workers turned shareholders is also gaining traction in the US, where around 7,000 businesses are now fully owned by their employees.
And finally from Stephen, a new study showing Chinese tourists, their rain and shopping sprees abroad.
That's right, Chinese tourists are among the biggest spenders when they travel, particularly to destinations like Paris. The average spend is around $3,000 per person. But a survey for Hotels.com found that just 1/3 of Chinese travellers said shopping was their priority this year. That's down from 2/3 last year. The decline is down to increasing numbers of people, Chinese people I should say, travelling abroad, up 4% last year according to official figures. They're choosing instead to spend their money on things like eating out and sightseeing.
I can agree with that. If you're here in Paris, why not eat out? Why not sightsee? Rather than going shopping, you're shopping anyway, can't you? Stephen Carroll, Business France 24.